Hello everyone, Santier here, and welcome to, well, Religion for Games crossed with Astral Collision. So this is going to be a practical example of the Religion for Games stuff that I've been talking about, because I've been working on this RPG Maker project, which you can see what's open right now because it's a nice flashy visual, and I'll use it to give you some context for what's going on. If you've not watched the parts of making Astral Collision, that's okay. I'm going to give you an overview for what you're going to need for what I'm doing here. We're predominantly going to be working over here in this document today because this is the main area of focus. Because this game that I've been working on has a bunch of different characters and stuff, and I need to flesh out the backstory. It's going to be really important for developing the worlds and developing all that sort of stuff. And this is fundamentally a religion-oriented game in the sense that the state of the world is heavily influenced by what's happened. So let's give an overview of what I've kind of planned out at the high level that I need to now flesh out details for. So at the high level, we have our world here. And the current state of the world is after an event called the Astral Collision, and they kind of are currently referring to the world as the Astral Collision. So the Astral Collision was an event where 14 different worlds were mushed together, and the reason why it's 14 is completely arbitrary. It is based upon how many spots I had in my little introductory screen right here to make characters for. That's entirely where the number came from. It has no particular significance. So the basic plot that I figured out so far for the world's history, and what's relevant here, is that the world was at one point one world, as it is here, and or maybe not exactly laid out this way, but you get the idea. It was one world, and there were 14 groups of people that ended up developing on that world. That then something happened, and the creator of that world was like, okay, now I need to enact some consequences because of how people have been behaving. The world was fractured into 14 disparate parts, and then for a couple thousand years, I'm not sure exactly how long, but my feeling is around 4,000 years, roughly, 3, 4, something like that. The worlds were each separated into individual worlds, their own little pockets. They could sort of connect to each other if they knew how, and over time they learned more and more how to be able to form communication with each other. And then an event occurred called the Astral Collision, which was instigated by some individual in each of these different worlds that then caused these worlds to collapse into one. And that brought a lot of different things that happened. Some of the areas did not go smoothly, like right over here in this desert. We have a lot of destroyed buildings because the collision didn't go well. There's a lot of conflict that happened and all that sort of stuff. So we have this event that happened of, I forget what I called it, but it's like the astral split or something like that, the astral separation. Something along those lines. And then stuff happens. These cultures develop individually, separate from each other, with their own sort of world scenarios, world situations, and then they're brought back together. And the different characters that bring it back together all have different motivations. So, for example, right here in this large continent, or kind of more some of this to some extent, music's getting strong. So let's quiet that down a bit. So there's an adventurers guild here, and they were looking at it as an opportunity to expand their clientele. That's an example. There's another one. I think it's this one right here. I would have to do a bunch of checking, but I could figure it out. Their motivation was they believed that it was their religious duty. And so each of these different places is developed differently with their own set of ideas and stuff like that. The characters that you play as are prophets who discuss this Astral Collision event before it occurs and some of the consequences of it. Those are who the party members are, and they're being empowered by the creator to go and do something in this world to try to fix things. They are all individuals who have perished and now are being brought back to life by the creator to go and clean up the world, basically, or to bring peace to it, or something along those lines. Again, some of this narrative is not super well thought out because I've kind of just been designing stuff and letting things flow because that's how I work best. But I'm at a point where I think it's really useful to have some of this backstory more figured out and some of these details more planned. So I've gone ahead and I've prepared some amount of this document, and you can see that there's a lot of stuff to kind of fill out. So let's kind of go over these sections. So there's constraints. Constraints are just what I'm calling the stuff that I have to work with. So let's turn this music back up a bit because it's gotten quiet. So there's a couple of things that I know right off the bat. So for example, I know that I start with a singular creator. That's the deity that exists at the high level. Now there's going to be more minor beings that call themselves deities, that call themselves gods that you're going to have to fight, but that I already kind of know because I've done a lot of background thinking on some of this stuff. And of course, this initial religion is going to be fairly minimal. It's a direct relationship with the creator. There doesn't need to be a lot of religious fluff. And then I also know that I'm going to have 4 different races: humans, Felakor, Yadar, and Rifa. Some of these are incredibly uncreative. For example, this is color and elf anagrammed, and this is dryad amagrammed and harpy amagrammed because they have wings, you see. Creativity can be challenging at times, so things like anagrams are useful. These came from the player characters, which are right here. You can see that there's a bunch of them. This guy, clearly not human. Clearly not human. She's got wings. Not human, pointed ears. So this is Felakor and Felakor. And this is a Yadar and Yadar. Most of these are human. And this is the, what did I call them again? Rifa. So, based upon, because I just made these guys without any particular intention in mind, so I set myself up with stuff that I need to now accommodate and account for. So, also you can see that all of these characters have blurbs, and there's all of these different world regions. So, I can do this, and you can kind of see the different. Some of the colors are not super distinct from each other, but you can see that the world is made up of a number of different regions, which I will probably be making use of as I go through this to kind of figure out some details. So I gave myself these 4 races that I need to work with, and there's some stuff that I've been thinking about a little bit in the background, particularly with these guys right here. There's only like what's the world situation, and these guys are represented in multiple of my heroes, and these guys are represented in multiple of my heroes, but these are represented in only one of my hero. Is there significance that I want to draw from that? Yes, no. I'm thinking I will. And then I have the 14 world sections that I have named. So we have Kendra, Sakraton. Thanks, music. Sakraton, because it's like sacred town. Yorgad Est, Kaldisha, Mavina, Galden, Elsana, Sindire, Ranpiety, Falsa, Tulador, Kushigai, Divertir, and Evanshire. If any of these are rude in any languages, I apologize. This is not my intent. You never know with some of this stuff when you're just trying to make up words. And then these are the blurbs about my heroes, as well as when they were in the time. So Sir Lionel was early in the days of his land. Sir Isabella was early. Gadagte was kind of in the middle. Asgardul was early-ish, so kind of late early. Talmund was late. Callista was middle. Isa was middle. Jennifer was late. Hannah was very early. She was the first one in hers. So that has specific stuff that happens from it, right? Devin McElroy was early middle. Francis was the latest, so he would have happened, or Francis is supposed to be a somewhat ambiguous character in that regard. They came into town like not long before the events happened, so they died during the Astral Collision itself and then got brought back. So there's going to be people who probably know this character, for example. Mishizo is in the middle, Bonpoing was late, and Sophia was late. So that's just kind of in that sort of window. I'm gesturing with my hands that you can't see, but in that sort of window between when the separation happened and when the Astral Collision happened, roughly what third of that do they appear in? Do they appear in the first third, the middle third, or the last third? Just to give some approximation for some of that stuff and sort of what their impact is and all that sort of thing. And then I have some questions that I know I need to answer. So why did the split happen? What were the things that brought about that consequence? Right? How do the playable characters fit in? What sort of role did they play? That sort of stuff. Who are my villains? Because some of these villains are going to be very much so like affected by this religion. And how does the game over mechanic work? So this is a really important question that I need to answer. So this is an RPG, an RPG Maker. The default way of handling game over is load your last save. I don't like that. There's a couple of reasons why I don't like that method of handling game over. Honestly, the biggest one is related to just the tedium of recovering where you were, because in any sort of inventory management you've done, any sort of items that you've collected or exploration, like rewards for exploration that you've done, having to redo that stuff is tedious, but having to remember what you'd done is a gigantic pain in the rear end. So I don't want to have to worry about that happening in this game, because I just don't like that play pattern. That's a little louder than I want it to be. Some of the loading from like a checkpoint and stuff can work really well for certain games that don't have that sort of aspect to it. Something like the Batman Arkham games can work just fine, where the game over happens and you go reload a checkpoint or whatever, and it doesn't work quite the same way. So anyway, I don't want to deal with that, so I have a plugin that I'm using that causes the game to just do some sort of whatever handling I want to do. And so what I want is I want the players to be brought back to a location. Now currently, they're brought back to the last place that they rested, the last inn that they rested at. But that doesn't seem very flavorful to me, and I want something that has more flavor, more connection. So what my inclination is to do is to have some sort of monument or some sort of... So this is one of the towns. There are different objects I could potentially place. I can always go and grab one of these and put it on its own separate sprite sheet to be able to use anywhere. And I'm leaning towards using something like this right here as some sort of monument that you can interact with to set basically your resurrection point. If you game over, this is where you respawn, is the last one of these that you interacted with. That's the direction that I'm planning on going with it currently, because I like that direction. I think that gives some more ability for me to develop a strong narrative reason for why this resurrection thing happens. Another potential alternative is I could take this particular thing here and use this lit up version when you've activated it, and I might go for that direction as well. Either way kind of works, but I can work with the same base principle of, okay, what is this thing, and why can you trigger it, and what is its significance, what is its meaning, why does it exist? I want to figure out those details, and I want to give some sort of narrative explanation for the mechanics. So you know how like Dark Souls' game over is like you died and you respawn at the last bonfire you rested, because that's how the curse of the undead works. Whatever. It doesn't have to be the greatest explanation, but I want some explanation. So I am inclined to go for this one, but anyway, regardless, I want to kind of figure out that detail. So these are some of the things that I need to answer. And so I have an initial situation. The world, I mean, let's just start writing, right? the world was created. Boom. That's the first thing. And then, so this brings up a question. What happened after the world? Let's get that verb in, or that noun in there. What happened after the world was created? So in this process, I think now this is the way that I tend to approach this stuff. I should back up for a moment. I tend to approach this from I guess mimicking sort of the through lines of like Genesis, or I mean it's kind of how the Silmarillion works as well, where the world is made. Why is the world made? You know, or not necessarily why is the world made. That's kind of the creator creates because that's what the creator does. It's definitional in the name creator, but the underlying like how does this process happen and how do things go sideways and all that sort of stuff, because I think it's like I think any creator that creates sentient, living, conscious beings, so things like aside from plants, basically, that are doomed to die cannot be rightly called a good creator. I think that there has to be some reason why death is introduced. So I like to think about what is this process? Why does that happen? And I think that it can be inevitable that that happens. But certainly my Christian beliefs influence what I think of a deity as being, and how a deity should function at sort of the highest level, I suppose, for lack of a other phrase. And so that influences the way that I like to do my world building, and I like to have a very religiously oriented world building process here. So this brings up a couple of questions of, okay, so the world was created, and then the 4 races of humans, and this is where I need to go reference, Felakor, Yadar, and Rifa. Rifa are created. Okay, so they are in relationship with the creator. This is our religion so far. They are in relationship with the creator. So this right here is religion so far. And that's what we've got, right? So then the question that happens is, okay, so why do we have these 4 different races? Are they all given different purposes, different roles, different goals? I don't know. But that's what we need to figure out here, is what were they, like, what was the purpose here? Now, we know a couple of things. We know that the Adar look similar to humans, but have skin that's not exactly human in its coloration, right? So we have an example of one that's green and one that's very pink. So we've got that going on. We know they have pointed ears and skin that tends to be more pale. So we have a bright blue and a white. And then the Rifa, the example we have of this is gray, and they have wings. So then we need to ask the question of like, okay, so we've got these 4, they're in relationship with the creator. What goes wrong? What sort of relationship are they to have with each other, and what goes wrong? So I think what makes the most sense is I kind of want to be somewhat a strict separationist in this, for no particular reason other than it makes it cleaner and easier to work with, of saying the humans, like, these guys basically ended up fracturing and splitting into different groups. So let's see. They were to be in community with each other. Okay, so this brings up an interesting question. So if we go back to the Genesis story of Adam and Eve and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we have here the singular command from God to Adam and Eve is that they are free to eat of any fruit of the trees of the garden except for the fruit from that tree. And the question then is, why is that? Well, there's the fundamental argument that human beings needed to be given the option to have free will to be able to obey God. If there was nothing that they could do wrong, then they couldn't choose to do right. And sort of that free will of obedience is an important part of having true obedience, right? It's one thing to put somebody in a situation where they can't do something against you, but that's not giving them the opportunity to choose to not do something against you, if that makes sense. And that choice is significant and important. And so what I think makes sense is, rather than a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we have here perhaps they're supposed to love each other despite their differences. So maybe there are certain traits about each of these 4 groups that then lend themselves to perhaps developing suspicions of each other or something like that. So that to me makes a compelling argument for sort of what happens. So, however, they choose to not love each other and instead segregate. So, here's what I'm thinking is, this probably took a couple, like, say, 80 years or something. And so I need to figure out a little bit more about the humans, Felakor, Yadar, and Rifa. So let's go ahead and go up here and begin adding stuff. I'm going to say that these guys reproduce the fastest. That is not how you spell fastest. Let's see. And then I'm going to say these guys... Okay, so this is where I'm going to do some quick math. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm just going to quickly throw in a 9 here. And then 2... I could have done this a different way by knowing there's 14 and 1. So these guys are going to reproduce at roughly 1/4 the rate of humans, and reproduce 1/4 the rate of humans. Thank you for giving me a nice, lovely 1/4. You're probably not going to give me a 1/9 here, are you? Reproduce at 1/9 the rate of humans. Nope, no beautiful 1/9. That's okay. It's not a common fraction. 1/2 and 1/4 and 1/3 and things like that. Ooh, do you have a 3/4? Yeah, you do. Cool. Sorry, that's a weird random geeking out. So this is important because what we end up having is the humans are going to develop tribes. So let's see. What I think is going to end up happening here is these guys have... okay, so I need to vocalize what I'm thinking here, and my brain's kind of going a little fast to kind of do that effectively. So, the human... I don't know what I want to call these. Forebears... Actually, you know what? Let's not worry about reproduction rates. This doesn't matter. I mean, okay, you know what? It does kind of matter. Okay, I'll leave it there for now. I can always retcon it later if I need to. One of the other things that I should have said off the top is this is going to be a first draft, so there's inevitably stuff that's going to change as I kind of refine what I need from this system. But anyway, so I like the idea of the human forebears. So the first humans have 9 children. These children become 9 tribes. The Yadar forebears. Let's see. What I want them to do is, rather than that, they have segregate into an in-group and out-group scenario. Hannah leads the out-group. So this is important. I'll get to that in just a second. Okay, the fellow core something and the Rifa are close-knit and refuse to interact with the other groups at all. Instead, okay, so let's think for a moment here. Okay, so what I'm thinking is I don't know quite what's going on here. So what's really important here, because Hannah is supposed to be sort of this prophetess that leads her people as their nomads. She's probably the eldest child of the out-group. Now, I don't know what separates the in-group and the out-group, but the because she is supposed to be leader there, what I'm seeing is they all want to be part of one whole, but there's a group that's kind of in control of sort of the central core that are like, no, you don't get to be a part of our group, and they kick them out. And so they are sort of the outcasts that then group together. So Boing Boing's group is part of that, is what that in-group became, and the out-group was led by Hannah and then becomes a different sort of nation with its own set of things. So here's what I'm kind of doing is I'm setting up, okay, what are the groups that end up splitting off and becoming these separate groups? So the split happens, lack of love between various communities, because let's see, the various beings were instructed to love each other. They were to be in community with each other, however, they chose not to love each other and instead segregated. So this is kind of you are to love each other is kind of the prime command. So what I want to do now is kind of pick some sort of trait for each of these to be kind of centered around. So these guys, I think, are purity. And this is what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to kind of push this a little far and have it fracture and cause problems. So what I'm going to need to do then is kind of think through, okay, what are things that make sense for these that are something that I can use as a way to introduce these fracture points. So these guys are probably going to be family, which is where we then get the tribalism from, right? So the humans' emphasis on family is going to cause them to value their family ties above community ties in a way that causes separation. So this, I think, is probably going to be friendship, because then you have the in-group, out-group thing that kind of happens with friendship-type situations. And so that seems like a great way of doing things that way. What I'm planning on doing with these guys is that they segregate themselves and they try to separate from all of the others because they're like, we don't like you, we don't think you're pure, and this is going to be really important for the development of what their culture ends up being. So that's going to be pretty significant. Now, as my brain kind of works on overdrive, So what we have is we have these different nations. I think these are probably going to end up, for the human nations, are probably going to end up being names of people. That's not human. Because I think that, okay, so, let's see. So human tribes are, let's do it this way. The human tribes are Kendra, Sacritan, Yorgot Est. This is like a common sort of thing. Mivina, Elsana, Palsa, Tulador, Pushigai, and Evanshire. Okay, so these are the human tribes. These are the tribal families. So these are the are named after the 9 children of the human forebears. So we've got these groups here. I'll need to figure out a few more details with them, but these are going to be the different forebears who then are the children who become the tribes that then these worlds are named after, which I think makes a lot of sense. Okay, so what do I know about these fellows? One group of them lives under the mountains, and another lives in... So let's go ahead and go over to my spreadsheet for a moment, where I have some world information plotted out. So let's see here. I need... Esgardul is medieval sort of section. Okay, and then they are up in that area. So they're probably very mystical. And they have more of a modern setting and live in an area kind of underground. So, but you can see, this wasn't even intentional at the time, but the ancient University of Gulda uses the same sort of apostrophe thing that's going on with Esgardul and Gildisha. So that's something that where I can sort of roll with that. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out sort of what are they about, right? And creativity, I think. Maybe? Does that make sense? How about knowledge? Like, that's kind of their... Well, I'm playing with this. I'm playing with this, and I might change it later, depending upon how I feel about it. Okay, yep. Now my brain's instantly going like, okay, now how can I work with this? So I think what we have here... get caught up in their fields of study and shut out others. Okay. So I think let's begin working on this. So Yadar groups are... okay, so we have... Where's Hannah? Unpiety is Hannah's world's name. And the other one is Divertir. Okay. So, yeah, like this doesn't necessarily matter as much. Okay. So we have the in-group and the out-group because this is from friendship stuff, creating in-groups and out-groups. The fellow core split into 2 fields of study. The natural world and the mystical supernatural world. So these are 2 different sort of fields of study because this is a thing with like magic and stuff like that. These guys are going to have more of an emphasis on magic, and these guys are going to have more of an emphasis on nature. And then the Rifa see the other groups as impure and thus wish to separate themselves from the others. Good old separate. Separate, not separate, and this is impure, not impure. Cool. And apparently closeness is 2 words, so why not? Okay, so we've gotten kind of our base scenario here. This is our initial situation. So they all split up and go separate ways. And so now at the split, what's happened is these different groups kind of split off. So here's where I know these scenarios go. This becomes adventure world. So, okay, so I have, with these character blurbs, information about how these different things go. So, what that means is that each of these human tribes has some sort of goal. So these guys, I think, want to be master hunters. That one was really easy to figure out. So I'm going to go look at stuff about each of these prophets. So Lady Isabella fought a campaign against evil. She won over these malevolent days even then. So her region is, if I go back to the world, is over here, where we have kind of this evidence of this conflict, and there's maybe some buildings that ended up here somehow. And this horrendous poison swamp, because that's interesting. And so they're fighting against some sort of evil forces. Now, this is going to be a lot of traditional monsters. So I think they want to guard against the darkness in people's hearts. Okay. Yorgot Est is up here. Got Oktay. Warnings of today were forgotten. So what sort of goal then do they have? Do I have anything? Now this is where I can go over to here to see. Did I write anything down already? Yes. Yeah, okay, so her tribe died out. That's why warnings were forgotten. So they're in the desert area. That's over here. So then the question is... now, this got interrupted by Kushigai, I think is what it is, popping up in the middle of it. But the question then is, what were they about? What was their motivation? Maybe they wanted to explore the world. I'm just going to say Wanderlust. That's pretty straightforward. Mivina is... Let's see. That is Talmud. Okay, so they wanted to pursue the power of gods. Elsana. Let's see. So the main thing that I know about Elsana is that it's in the cold. That's why it has its name. I'll let you see if you can figure out where that comes from. But anyway, so an advisor to his queen who recorded the many visions he saw. His accurate records have been recently found. Or have recently been found. So this is kind of the blurb about Isa. And they are up in... I mean, this is the part where you're just making stuff up, right? They're up in this area. So... what are they about? What was their tribe's motivation? Maybe they wanted to conquer the cold or conquer harsh climates. Conquer the cold? I don't know. This one has big question marks on it because I'm not entirely sure what I want to do with it. It's less well thought out, less well defined, but I can always figure out if this makes sense or if I can do anything with this seed of an idea. Like, some of these are pretty straightforward of, okay, how do they end up in the world that they're in? Right? So like this one right here, they're going to pursue popularity, entertainment. That's what they're about. And these guys right here, because of the coming off of Hannah, they are highly religious. So they are pursuing religion. But we'll get to where that causes problems in a moment. Let's see. No, this is just kind of like straightforward. I don't need to give separate things here. Yeah. So this one right here. Okay, so these guys are all kind of like straightforward enough now. Now I just need to finish kind of filling these out. So Valsaw is Devin McElroy, and Devin McElroy was a well-regarded soldier who dreamed of a war that was not his own. He recorded these dreams to no avail. So that doesn't tell me a whole lot about them. But this is an interesting one because what I kind of want is I want it to be a world that started off with a lot of conflict and then kind of is settled into more peaceful things. So if we look over here at Devin McElroy, right over here, he's 10. So that means he's going to be 100 over here in my region labels. And that is... where is that? I need to find the 100s. Over here. So then if I go back to this so I can see it. So we have kind of a straightforward place here. They don't have sort of the conflicts going on anymore. So I'll need to think about what exactly is going on here. Maybe they pursued justice? That could be an interesting one. I could do something with that. Love justice. Because that can always go wrong, because that can become very vindictive. There's a short line between justice and vengeance, and that's a dangerous line to fall across. Let's see, I was on Tulador next, so let's see. Tulador, Francis. Okay. So that obviously doesn't give me a whole lot of information to work with. A wanderer of the wilderness who suddenly ran into town spouting frantic tales of death and destruction. I don't got a whole lot from that particular seed. I believe Tulador is some of this area here, kind of around the outer perimeter. As I remember my setup, that's the 11, so I imagine Francis is 11. Yeah, Tulador. So you know what? Maybe they love the sea. Why not? That's something I can work with. Kushigai obviously has certain influences going on here. Is a poet. So maybe they love storytelling. And this one's pretty straightforward. This one I think is going to be loved righteousness. So like these goals are maybe not necessarily entirely aligned in terms of like having the same model or mode, and that's okay. I don't necessarily need them to be completely identical. This is going to be a longer episode today, everyone. So this is important because if we look at Sophia as a child of great potential whose prophetic words led to her execution as a blasphemer. So they're going to have what's basically going to happen here is there's a so when it comes to morality, when that is pursued in a sort of overzealous way that lacks forgiveness, it becomes very destructive. And so you get kind of the idea of like inquisitions and stuff like that. This is going to be a very straight-laced society with a very strict sense of propriety that is going to lead to problems. So that's kind of the direction that I'm going to go. So these guys wanted to be master hunters, and so wanted to be master hunters, and so they got a world of vicious monsters that they have to hunt. That's basically what's going on here. Sot. Is that how you spell Sot? No, I don't think so. Yes, I am going to consider changing it to that. Sought to confront the darkness in people's hearts. Thus, they got a world of that darkness manifested. So these guys had no desire to settle down, and thus received a world where such things were nigh impossible. Okay, so this is Esgardul's place. Yeah, so these are the people who wanted... Okay, so study the mystical and supernatural, a world plagued by spirits of many kinds. We'll just be general that way. Let's see. Desired the power of the gods. Thus got a let's see. Ascension through Deicide. Galden. Oh, yeah. So... yeah, this one is going to be very similar in many regards to Evanshire. So... this is the Rifa's world. The Rifa sought... I cannot spell sought, apparently. Sought purity, and in the end... fought to purge even themselves. Let's see. Desired to overcome the cold. Received that as their world. I don't know. It doesn't seem like much, but to learn the secrets of the natural world, and so we're given a world of let's see, deep secrets. I don't know. I'm gonna go something like that. Let's see. Wanted to pursue religion. World that became formed by that. Elsa. Pursuit of let's see. There we go. So they loved storytelling. So storytelling, and so they got a small featureless world. Only their imaginations could give them something with splendor. Okay, and then these guys are the in-group. World built on popularity and the pursuit of fame. And of course, the split brought death as well. So let's see. At the split, the different tribes were given over to death, natural consequence of separation from the source of life. I'm not going to go into that too much. Basically, if you go, like, I'm again borrowing a lot of base concepts from Christian theology here, which is basically that human beings end up dying because of being separated or having a much more tenuous connection to God, who is the source of life, and therefore being separated from the Creator by sin, which is doing wrong, in this case not loving each other as they were supposed to, which is the same case for us, means that the Creator can only tolerate our sinfulness for so long, and then death happens. So that's kind of just a natural thing here. And we're given their own worlds with shaped by their pursuits, something like that. Kind of given what they wanted, and that led to, given a world where conformity reigns. Because that's what ends up happening here, is that this is not worried about righteousness, but so much as it is, and you can see, like, that plays out really well here with all of these very samey looking farms, just one right next to each other, with a few other places here and there. So this is going to be something where it's like, yeah, these people are all like, you got to be this way, and their love of righteousness is going to transform into pushing a sort of conformity. So, love of righteousness becomes a love for the appearance of righteousness, which enforces a sort of, that's not how you spell, which enforces a sort of cultural mandated set of behaviors seen as morally right. So that's how that kind of works. Let's see. So this one eventually they learn what justice is and peace grows. Okay, so this is like... Shipping lanes become super important. Because remember, they are along here. They basically got this edge where things are separated by mountains, and they kind of have to like ship everywhere. I'm not quite sure what the story of this wall is. It doesn't really matter much. But yeah, so they have this sort of edge here, and so they spend a lot of time on the sea. They're going to have to contend with stuff related to that. Now, obviously, this is just straight world-building stuff, so what I need to do here is figure out what happens specifically to their religious understanding of the world. And how does their religious expression sort of play out? And that's kind of where I need to be going with this. Boy howdy, but we've already gone almost an hour looking at the timer here. And we've just gotten some basic framework stuff kind of pulled in. So let's see if I can move through this a little bit more quickly. We'll see. We'll see. I recommend everybody take a moment to drink something. I know I needed it. All right, so what do I know about this place? Adventurers Guild develops. That should have the apostrophe on the other side of adventurers. And so I know that happens. What I've been thinking about the plot generally is that Sir Lionel was relatively early here. And so Adventurers Guild probably founded by... Ooh, that is spelling why. By Sir Lionel. Maybe originally individual keeps. And then Sir Lionel and friends work together, build up mutually beneficial adventures guild. Let's see. What I'm thinking is the initial state of the world is everyone's kind of fending for themselves. So initial state is everyone is fending for themselves. Group up in keeps geographically, where the P is next to the H, and then the guild happens. So religiously, what would their beliefs kind of be? So this is one of those ones where what I need to kind of process is the original people here would have known about the creator. They would have known about the consequences that they suffered. So they were probably distracted by... So, okay. Thoughts just kind of jumped through a couple of different things there. So, because of the intense fight for survival, they came to revere... That's not how you spell revere. Revere the strongest among them who were able to defend them. Monsters as heroes. They tend to worship heroes. So, religion, hero worship, climbing in ranks in the adventurers. I keep wanting to put the apostrophe in the wrong place, but the guild belongs to the adventurers, not an adventurer. Adventurers Guild raises your relative reverence level. The leader of the guild is seen as a sort of not exactly supreme, but like not in the sense that I think of supreme anyway, as the highest deity of the land. A sort of leader of the gods type individual. Okay, so that seems to me like a logical extension of this is the world that they've been given. Here's how things kind of play out. I think here is going to be a little bit different. It's going to play out a little bit differently. So they have a world where there's monsters, and so in a different sort of way. So to clarify, these are going to be wild beast type enemies, and these are going to be things that are more along the lines of like vampires, werewolves, goblins, things that kind of are human-ish, that like humanoid or whatever, that then are representations of the worst characteristics of humanity. And so they're going to have like probably, I should be writing this down. They got a world of monsters that represent the worst aspects of humanity. These, yeah, that's the word. These, not those. These monsters are. Let's see. How do I want some of the defense of this? What I'm seeing here is something that's very monarchical. And defended against by the elders. Okay, so by resistance fighters organized by the elders. This becomes a monarchical system. There's a monarchy and all that sort of stuff. That is way too many new lines. Okay. And then what I'm thinking happens here is sort of a cult of the God King develops, where the ruler is seen as the benevolent protector of their people. I think that's pretty straightforward. That's the direction that I want to go with things here. They have kind of they have idolized their ruler. So what I think happens here is that the separate tribes kind of develop their own understanding of things. So they hold onto the memory of the creator, should be capital C. Each tribe ends up developing its own understanding. That is not how you spell understand. Where did that H come from? Sometimes spelling eludes me. Develop its own understanding. Some are quite far from the truth. That one's pretty straightforward. Often, almost all of them fell into worshipping some of the kinder, more powerful spirits of the land. That seems pretty straightforward. Tend to view the most powerful sorcerer of their lands as a god. Kind of various fiefdoms of deities. Yeah, something like that makes a lot of sense. You know, this is an interesting one. Okay, so where is Kalissa? My general led her people to great victories. Her terrifying visions led to her public humiliation. So I think they came to worship a set of moral laws. I'm going to say two factions developed different sets and fought against each other. Yeah, something like that. How did these people respond? You can see some of these are maybe a little bit less poignantly developed, but some of them require more work to kind of come up with an idea for. And thus, yeah, like these guys are pretty straightforward. They came to believe the stories of old as not just tales to entertain, but as myths of truth. There we go. That's pretty straightforward for them. These guys worship celebrity. That's pretty straightforward for what happened there. Or perhaps should read came to worship celebrity. So these guys came to worship a sterilized memory of the creator. This is something that can happen where greater emphasis is placed on social, cultural conformity than on the pursuit of the truth. Okay. Right. These guys right here came to disregard the tales of the creator as old, meaningless myths. Yeah, I mean, these guys formed a complex and highly structured religion. So this exact expression is probably going to be somewhat reminiscent of something like Roman Catholicism, just because it's a really good example of a highly structured religion. But I want to try to avoid going too much into those trappings as I'm able. I'm obviously going to have to get fairly close to them, because whenever you have some sort of highly structured and organized religion, you need a set of rituals, develop a set of rituals, priestly posts, and so forth. This is an interesting one. Pope type figure must always be a woman because of Hannah. let's see, came to worship the sea. I think that one's pretty straightforward. Probably personified in some sort of sea goddess. Maybe wind, weather deities. A sky god and sea goddess, perhaps? I think that's a pretty straightforward direction to go with Tulador, because that's the sort of thing that you kind of naturally see develop in certain cultures where the ocean is really important, where things like the environmental factors that have the most obvious impact on their lives, things like the weather, the rain, that sort of stuff can be associated with the sky god, and then the sea becomes an important deity as well. It can be male or female. You can see some variation in some of that. But that makes a lot of sense to me as something that happened here. And they developed this sort of pattern for how they did things. And I think that makes a sense for a good way to kind of go with what happens with them. These guys become very secular. Remember, their goal is to study the natural world. That's what they want to learn. They want to understand how the natural world works. And they have kind of disregarded a creator as a process. Yes, there's some commentary on our modern society embedded in that. It's part of my perspective. I'm not trying to tell people how to think. I'm presenting them an idea of here's something to consider, right? And so this sort of stuff is going to influence their society and their understanding of how things work. And so they have these tales of the creator floating around, but they don't really consider it with too much weight. But, that's kind of how they interact with things. So what we're going to see is as these things get kind of mashed together in the post-Astral Collision stage, there's going to be a lot of conflict between neighbors in particular, but between some of these different societies in terms of how they interact with things. These guys are probably going to elevate the court system to a high position, but I think that they're probably going to go fairly mellow and secular as well being a reference to Sindire. So, I see them as, we had all of these wars that we were fighting. They get caught up in the cycle of vengeance and kind of, they're not as concerned with, get caught up in a cycle of vengeance and warfare. And as a result, I'll fix the typo. Yes, I meant vengeance. And as a result, religious considerations got pushed to the side. Do I need this section? Yeah, this is probably going to kind of describe the world as it is just prior to the Astral Collision happening itself. But I think what I'm going to do is finish this section and then probably make this a two-parter, because this has clearly got a lot more going on than I initially thought it would have. So it makes sense to go ahead and do a two-parter. So who am I missing stuff for? I am missing stuff for Elsana. Is that it at this point? I think so. So what I'm probably going to do here, let's see. Elsana, what do you have going on? Food would be difficult to come by. Let's see. They probably would also develop some sort of. Let's see. How much would they hang on to memories of the creator versus how much would they pursue something else, something like some sort of sky god or a snow god or something like that. I feel like they might have a because it's so there's different directions that I could go here. What I think I'm going to do is develop a mixture of okay, so what I'm going to say is make the creator part of a pantheon that also includes a snow goddess consort. I think something like that might be an interesting way to go with them. Okay, so this gives me some framework for stuff. And what will happen is next week, I will come back and we will flesh out some of these details of, okay, what are these places like specifically when the Astral Collision happens? What are the situations going on then? And what happens after the Astral Collision occurs? What occurs to that world? And I'll also, I think, well, I'm just going to add in just before I go, monuments to the creator, some sort of unified poem, perhaps, that when interacted with, set that as the respawn point. I think I'm just going to do something like that. I think that's pretty straightforward. I like the idea of some sort of poem that is on these, that has some influence on stuff. I might work on that off camera. We'll see. But anyway, that's where I think I'm going to go with it. So, like I said, next time we will fill in more details and kind of flesh stuff out more. But you can see this process of, okay, I'm building up a world, and as I am doing this world building, as I'm coming up with this background, this backstory, this general stuff, I'm drawing from my own understanding of religious stuff and how that influences me, and then using that to kind of flesh out both the world and sort of the way that the religion works. And the way that these religions work then are going to be extensions of various things about how the worlds are kind of pulled together. And that's going to set up some of the stuff that we see here. In particular, things like people have maybe too much trust in the leader of the Adventurers Guild, and they don't hold that person properly accountable, and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here, and until next time, everyone, thank you for watching. Take care.